Welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am Dr. Christopher Holmes, host for this episode and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Jamel Alexander, who is an engineer, mentor, and entrepreneur with honors and recognitions under his belt. Welcome, Dr. Jamel Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. It is much appreciated to be here today.
This is gonna be a great interview. I told you I am a STEM person myself. I'm fanning out because you're here. I can't wait to talk to you, and I can't wait for you to share with our listeners. So first, let's just start by telling the viewers and listeners a little bit about your background. Like, where did it all begin for you?
Oh, that's a great question. So I was born and raised in the heart of New Orleans. Leslie Bon Ton Roulette, as they say.
Oh yeah.
Laugh, love, right? So I started off, I was basically, I can say I was in a single parent home most of my life. I did have a stepdad, but him and my mom split up. So I was back to square one. I still do well. I eventually went on to a place called St. Augustine High School, which is an all-boy high school in New Orleans. From there, I went on to Xavier University of Louisiana, XU.
Representing.
Physics. Then I went on to University of New Orleans, got a master's in applied physics. I didn't have enough of education. So I won a fellowship, which granted me to go to any school in the United States I wanted to. Georgia Tech, Stanford, all of those other schools. And I chose Mississippi State. And the people looked at me and laughed and said, "What are you doing? You could have went to Georgia Tech, you could have went to Stanford, you could have went to Penn State. You chose Mississippi State." Mostly because I was a homebody at the time. Okay. I loved to be, I didn't want to leave off and go too far. So I went right next door to Mississippi, and I still did well. So when I made it to Mississippi, I got a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering. And I did pretty well. I won a whole bunch of awards while I was at Mississippi State, and I still competed with students from Georgia Tech, Penn State, and all those other schools. So I still did well. Then after that, I worked at the university for a little while. Then I went on to work in the K-12 school system as a teacher for maybe a year, where I taught geometry to a whole bunch of high school students that taught me about myself. They said, "You're a good teacher, but you're too nice. We're going to get you, we're going to break you in." So I learned a lot going through that process. From there, I went to go work at the Arkansas Nuclear One in Russellville, Arkansas, as a nuclear engineer. Then from there, I moved on and went to go work for the Department of Defense, where I currently am now as a missile defense engineer. So that's a lot of simulation. It's a mouthful, but we do a lot of missile technologies.
So I'm looking at you, brother. You are young. You have done a lot in a short period of time. So now let's just jump right in, because you hit some things that people are like, he did what? Okay, so you got a degree in physics and went back and got degrees in engineering.
Yes, sir, I did.
Why engineering?
So when I was at the University of New Orleans, I was going to get a PhD in applied physics. And I had a great professor in physics. He was an Indian professor, older guy. And I remember he looked at me when I won that fellowship. He said, "Don't be stupid. A physicist is a great guy, very smart, but he doesn't make the money that an engineer does. You'll be very poor as a physicist. Go back to school and get that mechanical engineering degree and go make some money." I said, "Okay, the fields are pretty close. I consider a mechanical engineer a highly paid physicist."
Okay.
So I went back and I pursued that mechanical engineering degree, and it was exactly the same. As a matter of fact, I still use my physics principles to solve engineering problems. So it's exactly the same in my head, exactly the same.
So that's a little bit of doing what you want to do and doing what you need to do at the same time, but I like it. That's a smart guy.
Yes, sir.
So now, for everybody who's out there listening, who has no desire to be an engineer, have no interest in engineering or physics, and it is something when you mention the word, they probably shiver. Why is it important that your layperson knows and understands what you do? Why is your work important to them?
So when I think about engineering, engineering is about problem solving. To me, all disciplines are problem solving, but engineering focuses on key problems. You got energy, you got water resources, you got education problems, you got democracy problems, you got health problems. So when I think about this, you think about problems that happened in Flint, Michigan with the water resources. You think about problems that happened a few months ago with Texas where they had the power outage. So you think about how engineering can also fix problems within a society. That's one thing that attracted me to engineering in the first place.
So you like problems.
I love problems.
Another thing that people are afraid of. People don't want problems. Like, no, don't give me any more problems. And here you are entering into a field of problems.
The world is filled with lots and lots of problems.
and we need people like you that enjoy that type of work. So now you're in this field. You're fairly young, but you've done so many things. Who has had a tremendous impact on you in your current career?
Wow, that's a great question. So thinking back, I had two chemistry professors. So even though I was a physics major, I worked under two chemistry professors. One that happened to be white, Rondell at Xavier, and the other one that happens to be black, Dr. Lamar Maida, both in chemistry. They exposed me to research. I was just a little boy from the hood of New Orleans, no experience in research whatsoever, but they gave me that experience in the lab. They also trusted me to go stand in front of an audience and give a presentation, which is, I think that's something that has to be done at a university level to kind of get you ready for your career path. So being in front of a whole bunch of professors and students and talking about your research, that's a scary thing to do, but it's also exciting because you have to convey information so that everybody understands what you're trying to say.
Right.
So they gave me that opportunity, and they gave me the opportunity to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's something that lives with me to this day, to this very day.
And you know, that's one of those things that most people that enter into those STEM fields, we don't do that very well because we just normally like to go to our lab or go to our space and work and let somebody else talk about it. Now we have to talk about this work. It's like, wait a minute, I didn't think that was part of my job.
And now I work for the Department of Defense. With the Department of Defense, you have to talk a lot. You have to talk to generals. You have to talk to admirals. You have to talk to everybody and kind of convey information in such a way that they understand. They don't want to hear you as an engineer. They want to hear you as a person. Tell me what you know and tell me up front in a clear sentence. So you're like, whoa, I got to not put all of these technical terms into the sentence and just be upfront about what I need to say. So having a lot of communication early on helps later in the career. Definitely.
I can only imagine. In the Department of Defense, like, oh man, I mean, not only are you dealing with these high elite official officers with a little bit of ego, but then you're trying to explain something to them in layman's terms because that's not what they do. And you have to make them know that what you're talking about is also important.
Yes, sir. That's it. That is correct.
So what's one thing you wish you would have known early in your career?
So one thing I wish I would have known earlier, and I thought about this hard. One thing I wish I would have known is about the different job sectors. Government, health, education, energy, all of those different things. I thought about that because when you're in school, you don't know which path to take. You don't know, should I go this path or should I go this path? My ultimate end game is to become a dean of engineering, and I'm not taking the traditional path by any means. I'm not becoming an assistant, associate, and a full professor. I am working as a senior engineer with the Department of Defense, and I'm still recruiting at universities, and I still give talks at universities. So I still have my hand in that pile, and I still have my eye on the goal to become a dean of engineering. So with that being said, I thought about finding people who work in similar paths or came across the similar paths that I'm taking, who worked in industry and came over to academia via some other path. So I'm doing the same thing. I put those people in my circle and I said, how did you do it? I want to do the exact same thing you did to become a dean of engineering without going through all the rigorous tenure processes that are out there. So that's one thing that I did do.
Okay. So what continues to drive you though? I mean, I'm sure, as you said, this is a problem-based field, so there's a lot of things going on. So what continues to drive you to be passionate about the work that you do?
So what continues to drive me is that more so than ever now, I am a culturally responsible engineer. I want to fix problems in my community. And I've always had that in me as a fifth grader. Right? My mom has a big picture on the wall where I wrote a letter in fifth grade saying that I wanted to fix the city, get rid of all the crime, give children more opportunities and things like that. But as I got older, that still resonated with me. And now I want to help young African Americans, both male and female, develop companies that can do quantum computing, make computers that are super fast, with these handheld devices that we hold every day in our hands, cell phone, the greatest device, bring those applications to people who don't have that access. Right now, we live in times of COVID where students don't have the access to the resources that they used to have. Where you're in class with the teacher, you're learning, you don't have that anymore. So now you're at home with your mom and dad who might not have that experience to help you with the math or the science, so now you're getting further behind. So those are the types of problems that I like to focus on and try to fix and remain culturally responsible. I think about problems like Flint, Michigan. How could we have prevented that in the first place from happening, especially within a community? I think about Texas. How could you have prevented that with solar energy or wind power? So I want to get more people, especially minorities, to think about how to do those things early on. So that's what keeps me going, and it keeps me going all the way through. Now I still work with the Department of Defense, but I also think about how can you get younger people to start companies that pivot into the Department of Defense, because the government spends so much money through contracts. So how do you get those people involved? So that's something I think about constantly. My mind is always spinning in that direction.
So I hear it as you talk about it, but just share a little bit about what excites you about the future of engineering. You kind of touched it a little bit, but
okay.
What excites
you? What excites me more about it is the new technologies, new materials, stronger, better, more efficient, finding materials that help with diseases, especially within our community. You have HIV, you have diabetes, you have all these things. So how do we find new materials that can combat that, can fix it? I also think about the self-driving vehicles. Even though we're getting to that direction, what about cyber attacks that might happen, So now you need other things to think about. There are multi-faceted problems that happen. You got these self-driving vehicles, you got to worry about the cyber attacks that might happen. You have, education itself. How can we revamp it into the future? How can we do more things online, get kids more engaged? How can we create those new technologies to keep it fun and exciting? So those are things that are coming up down the pipeline that keeps me excited, because I want to have a hand in all of it and think about how to do it more and more so. So those are things that keep me going each and every day. I get in my car and I think about it. I get at work, I'm thinking about it. How can you develop a new technology to fix this? How can you develop something new to fix this? So that's constantly going through my head every day.
So if you have a kid, he's looking at you or she's looking at you and they're saying to themselves, God, I want to be like Dr. Alexander. What advice would you give them for those people that want to enter into your field?
I would say this: keep yourself capable, run with your strengths, keep relevant, and also keep people around you that do what you want to do. When I was young, I mimicked a lot of people. I guess part of me that likes education comes from the fact that I mimicked my teachers. I like the ones that were kind of funny. I like the ones that were kind of serious, so it kind of developed my style. At the same time, I learned something about myself. I mimicked their handwriting. I said, I like the way this teacher writes. It's clear and it's concise. Now I write just like that. So some of my people at work say I write like a girl. I was like, what? But I learned that from them. And as I went through college, I didn't start off as an engineering major outright. I started off in economics, then transitioned to chemical engineering. Why did I get out of chemical engineering? Because I was trying to date too many girls at the same time, so that didn't work. And I also couldn't remember things in my head. So in chemistry, they said, do you remember all of those formulas? And I was like, no, I don't remember that. So then I transitioned over to physics, where you don't have to remember as much. So that came easier to me. But I do say, stay relevant and go with your strengths at all times. No matter what people tell you. Sometimes people try to negate your strengths, but go with your strengths at all times and stay relevant.
So you talk about relevancy. How do you stay abreast on current trends?
So the way I stay abreast of current trends is by reading a lot, something I didn't do when I was younger. I wish I did that more. But now I pick up more magazines, books. I'm on airplanes, I'm reading stuff. I'm in the airport, I'm reading. I go to Walmart, my wife is shopping sometimes. I go sit in the back and I read. But read more, join blogs, go on Reddit, find out what's new, what's trending. And sometimes I even go to stock apps to see what's going on new in the stocks. Elon Musk may be working on something new with SpaceX. So I'll log and say, well, let me go check it out, see what he's working on that's new to keep me relevant. So I can talk about that and have to talk about it at the table.
Yeah.
Also, I go on Twitter. I just follow people that I admire that are doing things, once again, like Elon Musk, giving out all these secrets to the electric vehicles and letting other people copy it so he can stay ahead. But learning those new things to keep me abreast of what's going on in the world.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of successes in life, and you've pivoted different times to kind of get to where you are now. But what would you consider to be your biggest failure? How did you overcome that? And then what did you learn from it?
So let's see, my biggest failure. It's a couple of them. Nice to you. So one of them is not being an avid reader. So when I was young, I didn't read as much. I did as much as I could to get by. I think there was something in high school called Spark Notes. I remember we had to read those big books. I was online to find Spark Notes and get what I need from it and say, okay, I can make a 70 or 75 on this test based on what I read. But later on, that hurts you when you go to a career, right? Because now you really have to sit there. You have to read stuff thoroughly. You have to be correct on what you do and come correct. Somebody else may have outread you. They're more prepared than you are. So I think now when I look back, I didn't read as much. So now what I do is I pick up a lot of books. I read more. I keep myself informed with new things that are going on by following my friends who work in different areas. And they also tweet and they blog and do things like that. So I follow them. Another thing that I failed at tremendously was not pushing my professors hard enough in college. I don't think enough of us ask our professors, how is this relevant? What do you use this in the real world? So here we go, we're doing all this math in class, and then you graduate and you're like, I don't know what to do next. I'm good at math, but I'm not good at doing other stuff.
Right.
And you don't find that out till you get to the job. That's a different problem. So now pushing professors while you're in class, you pay tuition. Ask them, hey, how is this relevant? What can I use this in the real world? Show me, give me an example. You got the PhD. And last but not least, I would say this. We have to get back to the business of doing business. When I was in college, I didn't think about starting a business model. I think that's really important. Once again, if you ask your professors what's relevant, how is this usable, you can start thinking about how to develop your own business model. Everybody has a different type of creativity within them. I think if you find that spark a little bit early while you're in college, you're more inclined to graduate and say, you know what, I'm confident that I can start a business. I can do my own model and run it from the ground up without getting all of this necessary training and all the other stuff, because now I'm confident within myself. So those are three things I wish I would have done. And having platforms such as the Black Doctoral Network, NESBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, the American Society of Engineering Education, you look back and say, man, with all this exposure I'm getting now, I would have been a great businessman, because now I got so much exposure to things that are needed in these communities. And now I can bring them to those communities because I've gained those transferable skills needed to enhance that community.
Yeah.
So those are things I think about constantly.
Most definitely, especially, you spoke about BDN and then NESBE. I was a part of NESBE when I was an undergrad, and I feel like everybody doesn't feel like they have a space in NESBE because they may not be an engineer. But at the time, you were a physicist and you joined. I was a biologist. I joined, but I don't think all students realize this is a STEM-based type of program for minority students. And so I know you won big awards with NESBE. So just talk a little bit about NESBE and why NESBE has been so important to you.
Oh, NESBE has been so important to me. They are a family. And that's the key to NESBE. It's a family. So when I was at home in New Orleans, I used to go do a walk for education with the NESBE chapters. And one thing I seen was a whole bunch of young Black and Hispanic scientists and engineers walking together, talking and communicating from different majors. And that was exciting.
Yeah.
That's when I first learned about teamwork. It's like, oh man, these people do work together and accomplish stuff. So the traditional stuff you hear about engineers, sometimes, oh, engineers can be antisocial. Engineers, they don't do this, they don't do that. But when you get around the people that are similar to you, you say, okay, they do talk. They do that. They just talk about different things that they know about. So I get it. And the other thing about NESBE, provides so many opportunities. You have to be blind if you're not paying attention to the opportunities. You got so many opportunities to join companies, national labs. You can go sit in workshops. You can find mentors. NESBE has provided so many outlets for a person to become successful. You just have to be willing to get involved in NESBE. I tell people, don't just participate. Yeah. Don't just pay your dues and go to the meetings every once in a while. Go outside to those special events that NESBE offers. Go sit in them and say, okay, I get it. I get what the organization is all about. It's making us winners, one person at a time. Get this job, be successful, come back, lend a hand to the next person. So it instills that in you from a younger standpoint. So that's a good thing, a very good thing.
So I must admit, if I had to put my little hand up, I was one of those people in the beginning that just paid their dues. Because I wanted to put that on my student resume that I was a member of NESBE. It wasn't until I was a senior I really got involved, which is probably too late. But I'll be honest, I did. I paid my dues and I just went to the meetings. And I didn't go to the meetings.
Never too late. Never too late.
So for everybody out there, if you're in NESBE, be active. It's a great organization. It's a great organization. So we talked about failure. Let's talk a little bit about accomplishment. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment to date?
Without hesitation, is mentoring 90 plus students and professionals. So going through all of my collegiate experiences, I was fortunate that I went to a HBCU first, then I went to an urban university second, and then I went to a primarily white institution last. So I gained a lot of exposure through those three universities. And what happened over time is I learned certain things. Xavier actually gave me a little bit more confidence than I thought I had. You know, I didn't think I could compete with students from the PWI arena because we didn't have the necessary resources in the university. But one thing Xavier did was instill leadership. So when I went to the University of New Orleans, which was an urban university, it was not as bad because I knew how to assimilate within that culture. I was a leader. I was taking on projects, taking on leadership roles in organizations, and I started growing my strengths. I started to communicate more. I started doing more outreach events. I was comfortable being more around people that were not my discipline, business majors, psychology majors, even the crazy, what they call them, philosophy majors. They talk a different lingo and you got to hang with them. So being around those different people, you learn so much. And so when I got to Mississippi State, that's when the family started. I seen so many students struggling that came from maybe poor backgrounds. Then they were dumped into this PWI as an undergraduate student, so they didn't know how to navigate that scene. Whereas at Xavier got more support because they understand the environment. So coming through there, I got to mentor so many students coming out. They're like, so what do you do next? I said, Professor Major Matt, but go sit down and talk to him. Get to know who that person is and say, hey, when you were teaching earlier, I didn't understand what you meant by this. What did you mean when you said this? Eventually, students started coming to me one by one. How do you navigate this scene? When you have this professor that's outrageous, go sit down and talk to him. Sometimes people are not aware of their personality. So when you go to them and you give them a refreshing on their own personality, say, okay, let me talk normal to you. I'm glad you came to me. But other than that, it's been exciting mentoring a whole bunch of people, even the professionals. So students that have graduated, went on to professional careers, I still get calls. Oh, you remember you told me this back in the day? It works. I said, see, yeah, it's nothing different. If you're not given the opportunity to stand up for yourself and speak,
yeah,
you can't be tied to a job. I said, job is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to grow, to stand up and speak. Don't be afraid, because that's the only way you can get ahead. Don't be the only man on the floor that's not talking, and everybody else is talking behind the scenes, getting ahead of you. I said, so be on the floor talking. Go talk to the supervisor.
So let's talk a little bit about just the career aspect now. So you've been in your career for a while. So what has been one challenge that you faced in your career, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, so wow. I'll say one challenge right now is with the Department of Defense. So when I got to the Department of Defense, I was, let's see, when we first did the orientation, I was the only African-American in a room full of 100 people across many disciplines, various disciplines. And I'm in the heart of Washington, D.C. I was like, wait a minute, Washington, D.C. has a whole bunch of brothers and sisters. Why am I the only one sitting in this classroom? That's a big eye opener. So the first thing I did, and this has to go with a growing mindset. First thing I got back to the office, I wrote the director of our agency a strong letter of support. I said, hey, I understand everything we're doing, but I looked around the room when I was in orientation and I seen I was the only African-American representing my own culture. I said, when there's a lot of people, and I said, what are we doing to make sure that the young brothers and sisters do have a chance to sit in the same seats? And he sent me a strong letter right back to me saying, hey, I'm so glad you said that. I'm frustrated too. I've been noticing that same problem. And he said, I would like for you to sit on the board to help us recruit more underrepresented students into this Department of Defense sector. I was like, yes, sir. So I'm with it. But I said, how do we start those initiatives? Where do we start? Do we have hard numbers? Do we have everything? So that's one thing I challenge people: stand up early and talk. Put yourself out there.
Yeah, I mean, you did it. So, I mean, you talked about it earlier, but when you did it, you see what happens. And the thing is, you can't do it with fear.
That's it. That's it.
You can't do it with fear. I mean, because you didn't know what he was going to respond with, but you were very passionate about what you saw and what changes you wanted to see. And you just spoke up. And now look,
Yes,
you're on
sir.
the board. Now you're a big wig. You're on the board.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about this. How do you define success?
So when I think about success, and I know there are many definitions, and some people just don't even go with success, but when I define success, is a series of attainable actions to achieve a desired effect or impact. So a series of attainable actions. You list actions that you want to take to know where you're going. So you say, this is where I want to go, and these are the things that I need to be doing to go there. Last but not least, what is the desired effect that you're trying to achieve? What are you trying to get from this? I do this to a whole bunch of students. What are you trying to get from this? Okay, you got an engineering degree, but where are you trying to go? Do you know where you're trying to go? I don't know. I got an electrical engineering degree. So he's graduating with an electrical engineering degree and you got a 4.0. And you sitting in front of me saying you don't know where to go? You had a guy in front of me who had a 2.5 in electrical engineering saying, hey, I want to be a CEO of this company. So what is going on? So I say, what the attainable actions that you want to achieve, and what's the desired effect of those actions? Where are you trying to go? Let me know.
That sounds like an engineer talking.
Yes, sir.
Steps, procedures, goals, all of that, going back to the table, redesigning it if you fail.
That's it.
The goal is, I hear an engineer talking to me.
Yes, sir. That's it. That's it. That is it.
So what would you say? We talked about a challenge in your career. What is your most proud moment?
My most proud moment is, let's see, starting an organization at Mississippi State University. So when I first came there, there was an attrition of African-American mechanical engineering students in the program. So what I did was I started an organization that's called MEMO, the Mechanical Engineering Minority Organization, where we welcome any other major to come and join. So what I did was I trained them on things they should be doing their freshman year, their sophomore year, their junior year, and their senior year. Like that, for the freshman year, you should be sitting down, getting a mentor under your belt. Your sophomore year, you should be sitting down, figuring out whose lab you're going to work in. Even if you don't like laboratory experience, even if you don't like research, get under a professor, just see what it's like.
Yeah.
That way you can get all the kinks out of your system, things you like and you don't like, and you also deal with the person who's in senior authority over you. They can kind of guide you and say, oh, I don't like what you did when you gave this reason. Why didn't you like it? And they give you input. but you learn earlier from those people. But I also gave them avenues of opportunities to look for and things like that. And when we done, we were family members at the end. So now they graduate, they still call and say, hey, I made it, I got the job. So that's all it is. It's a big family. So I gave them the whole idea of family and teamwork. Work as a team while you're in school. If you see a person next to you failing, pick up their hand and say, hey, let's work on this tonight. Let's study together and kind of figure out the kinks.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most proud moments I've ever seen.
Yeah, building that community, I think, probably made a huge difference for those students, especially for students that look like us. We come in not knowing how to navigate the space. We got in the door. We want to, as you said, we know the goal is to graduate and get the degree, but sometimes people don't give us the steps, especially if those people don't look like us. They're not reaching out, pulling us in to pull us up. So what you did was, I'm sure, was critical, and that's why they still call you, because they were so thankful for what you did for them, because nobody else was doing it.
Yes, sir.
So here you are, an expert in the field. You're mentoring, you're giving back, and you're also a part of BDN. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network enhanced your career?
Networking. I always learned that networking is one letter away from not working.
I love that.
Plus, it's a multi-purpose platform. So I'm an engineer, and I like to hear things that are going on in history, politics, economics, and there are a bunch of great people in the Black Doctoral Network that has that experience, that provides a good provide great advice to that. So having those people around and just listening to them helps to fuel your fire, kind of gets you going in the direction, oh, I need to focus more on this. That's the problem as well. So you get new problems as well as you network with great people doing some exciting things. And that's a beautiful thing to see.
Well, man, we are so proud to have you as a part of BDN with the level of expertise and just your passion for people to support and bring up others that look like you in the field of engineering. So thank you so much for everything that you are doing. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank our viewers for listening and our listeners for being out there supporting. It has been a pleasure, Dr. Jamel Anderson, to have you. Will you please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work you're doing?
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Jamel Alexander. I should probably be the first one. There's not too many of us. But I did go through Facebook and there was another one. He's like, hey, you got the exact same name as me. I was like, oh, wow. And we look just alike. That's scary. But you can find me on LinkedIn at Jamel Alexander, and I look forward to talking to each and every last one of you without hesitation.
So please be sure, for everybody that's out there, please be sure to stay connected to the Black Doctoral Network and connect with us on all of our social media channels. Thank you for joining us today for the Black Doctors Talk podcast. We hope you will join us again next time. But for now, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to tell a friend. Thanks so much, and you guys be safe, be blessed.